Okay, good afternoon. Vivi folks, can you hear me okay? Got a thumbs up? Great. Good afternoon. My name is Ben Newton. I'm the co-founder and COO of Vivi. For those of you that don't know Vivi, and today is not about Vivi, I promise, despite our backgrounds and our colorful images of our campuses behind. Vivi provides childcare and early learning for today's families. We partner with employers of all sizes to make exceptional full-time and backup care more accessible and affordable to families around the country. With beautiful campuses, flexible offerings, and trained, passionate teachers, we provide parents with peace of mind while offering our employer partners the most powerful tool of recruitment, retention, and productivity. For those of you that would like to inquire about Vivi programs in the future, we run full-time childcares and preschools as of today at our three wonderful campuses by the World Trade Center in Northern Tribeca, and now just most recently at Hudson Yards. We offer a virtual tutoring platform for school-age children, grades K through 12, and we have an in-home program that runs around the country. We have been open throughout the pandemic. And so we're happy to talk about as a focus of today's conversation about how we operate during COVID times. And the good news is that we're definitely looking up. But really the focus of today is to support families with researching on how to research and how to choose the best school for your child and for you as families. The choice of where to send your child to school is an important decision, and it is our hope but that by the end of the session, you have some new knowledge to start this process with more confidence and probably most importantly, less anxiety. And that's going to be a theme that we touch on a lot today, and that you as parents should really work to trust yourself and trust yourselves in your gut. And we are going to look to provide you with a number of resources to guide you through that today. We have asked our three heads of schools to join us for today's presentation because as educators, longtime educators within New York City, they've been a part of the New York City ecosystem for a long time. And so I would venture to guess that there's not a question that they haven't seen, and there isn't too much that they don't know about the school process. And they've worked with a lot of different families at different steps of the process. Today is really going to be an open conversation. We're going to present for and talk for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to really open it up to parents, because what we know is that the considerations for choosing schools are very individual, and we want to make sure that we can hear from you, and also, frankly, you can hear from each other. So it's now my distinct honor to introduce our three heads of schools that are here today, and then I'm going to ask them to say a few things. First up is Meg Rusa, who's the head of our Hudson Yards campus. Maybe Meg, you can give a wave. Um, Meg is the head of school for our Hudson Yards campus, which just opened up last week. Meg brings over 30 years of teaching and leadership experience to Vivi. She began her career as a kindergarten and first grade teacher at New York City independent schools ranging from Trinity, Friends Seminary, and Packer Collegiate. She was the founding director of Plymouth Church Preschool in Brooklyn Heights. She has most recently returned to New York after 18 years, where she worked in Seattle, where she worked as a teacher in Seattle at the University Child Development School. And she actually, believe it or not, most recently, she just joined Vivi after most recently being the head, finishing a 6-year tenure as the head of school for Ascend International in Mumbai, India. As a working parent of three now grown children, Meg knows the challenges faced by working families. She brings a deep appreciation for the magic of early childhood to everything that she does, and she's a wonderful thought leader for us. In my little Brady Bunch of grid of faces that I can see on my screen, right above Meg is Serena Edmonds. Maybe Serena, give a quick wave. Serena's the head of our Tribeca campus. Serena's been the head of our Tribeca campus since January, but previously she was a founding member of our faculty in the infant classrooms. Prior to joining Vivi, Serena had spent 20 years with We Care Child Care and Preschool on the Upper East Side, where she started her career as a toddler teacher. And for those of you that know toddlers, know the value and expertise of being a toddler teacher, worked her career up from being a toddler teacher to an education director to eventually the program director. Serena has led Vivi's efforts throughout the pandemic, and so is an expert on health and safety protocols and how to run our programs safely. At the bottom is Lee Delaney, the head of our World Trade Center campus. For some of you may know Lee, our World Trade Center campus was previously known as Trinity Church Preschool. Lee has been there since the mid 1990s, where she started her career as an infant teacher, and over the period where she started her time as a teacher from then till today, she's worked her way up from a teacher to administrator. She was a long-time assistant director of the preschool, and when Trinity Church Preschool became the World Trade Center campus, graciously agreed to accept the title of head of school, but the reality was she was serving as head of school for a lot longer. She's a wonderful educator and administrator, and also an expert in school missions, which we'll make sure we find time to talk a little bit about today. Next, I'd like to ask, and I actually forgot to put the nice headshots up while I was doing the introductions, but next, I'd like to ask each of the heads of schools that I've introduced just to say a quick hello, give it a quick tidbit on what advice you typically give parents in choosing the right school, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Lee, since I did you last, why don't you go first?
Okay. Nice to meet everyone. I think that as part of the admissions process, I've always focused on making sure the parents come in are comfortable, but also really are thinking about what's going to work for them and the logistics behind getting to school every day, but also what's right for their child. So it's kind of a split screen of feeling what's in your gut, as well as feeling what's going to work for you on a day-to-day basis.
Lee, thank you so much. Meg, why don't we go to you? I think you may be on mute.
So
there you go.
This is a perennial problem that I have. I just want to talk about why I love early learning. I think early learning is just amazing. I walked into the wiggle room in our school this morning and 3 little kittens came up to me. I love that magical thinking. You know, they were kittens. They weren't pretending to be kittens. They were kittens. And I can talk to a kitten one day and I can talk to a superhero the next day or in the same day. So that's why I love my job. But I think play is the most powerful tool for learning. So when you're looking for a school, you want one that has a very rich environment that will foster creativity, problem solving, develop language schools through the language of play. That's how children learn. And it's important to kind of see where the teachers are in the room and where the kids are in the room. You should hear the children's voices a lot more than you hear the teachers' voices. And you should be able to look at the walls and look at the art and see evidence of creativity. I really get spooked out when I go into a school and there's that same piece of art produced on the wall, which is telling me that they care more about following directions than being creative and finding your own way.
Wonderful, thank you. And Serena.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. What I tell parents when you are looking for a school, whether you visit virtually or in person, I know a lot of things are virtual now, pay attention to the demeanor of the teachers and how they're interacting with the children. See if those interactions are personable and loving, and also the space. See if the space is set up so the children have access to all of the toys and the equipment. You don't want to go somewhere where things are up on high shelves where the children aren't able to obtain them. Those are the things that I tell parents to focus on.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for those wonderful introductions. And as promised, we really want to kick this off to parents. And so what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to Q&A. We have some questions that we can provide answers to, but we really want to open it up to parents now and give you the opportunity to ask questions about the school selection process. What we'll do is I'll quarterback questions to our participants, and throw questions their way. If you have any questions about how to do that, what you can do is actually type your questions into the chat, or if you look at the Zoom ribbon, it's the black ribbon with the different icons, you'll see that there's a section that says Q&A, and you can just type your questions right in there. Okay, thank you. Well, we got our first question, and Meg, I'm going to throw this to you. The question is coming from a parent that's looking at early childhood programs, and they've heard about different pedagogies like Montessori, Reggio, Waldorf. Could you give us a sense of, as parents get to know schools, of these different pedagogies that are out there? Can you give us a little taste of what maybe each one of those is and what we do at Vivi? Yeah.
Sure. I think mostly what we do at Vivi is we take what we like from all of those things. But I think that it's really important to understand that what is the same about all of those things. They're all wonderful. Reggio is amazing, and it comes from this little town in Italy where they really involve the community. And Waldorf has a lot of constructivism in it. I think that at the core of all the best early childhood programs is that idea that children construct their own learning, that what our job as educators is to really set the stage for them to be able to joyfully discover the things that they need to know. So that learning is essentially a really social and interactive process. And that's what you want to, that's what all of those Montessori, Waldorf, and Reggio have in common. I think another thing they have in common is a commitment to developmental ages and stages of children. And that really comes from the father of what we call the father of constructivism, who is Jean Piaget. So we really follow his philosophies a lot. And the other sort of inspiration, I think, for a lot of what you see in early childhood education is John Dewey, who was another kind of philosopher who really thought about young children and how learning needed to be social and it needed to be interactive.
Great, thank you, Meg. Lee, I'm going to throw this next question to you. This question is from a parent who has a question about the difference of a preschool day versus a day at a childcare, or what are commonly referred to as daycares. Could you give, in two ways, can you tell us maybe the difference between like a private preschool and a daycare and like just pure definition terms? And for parents interested in what happens during a longer program day, maybe you could quickly take us through, and I can remind you at the end because I'm throwing a lot at you, what maybe like a full day looks like for an infant versus like what a full day may look like for a 4-year-old, for parents that are entertaining a program that's open 10 hours a day.
Sure. So I think, the terminology that gets thrown around, whether it's preschool or daycare, I think aren't clearly defined. I think what the important piece is that you're looking at, there are hours in the day that are going to be more care related, and then there's going to be hours in the day that are going to be more focused on education. But the important piece, and it kind of speaks to what Meg was saying earlier, is that even care is education. So I think that what we do at Vivi and what we really believe strongly in is that even as the children come in and they trickle in the morning, there's going to be kind of a free play. There's going to be things out for them to do and kind of explore on their own. As the day continues and we get more toward 9:30ish, most of the children are in, and these are in the older classrooms. In the infant classrooms, there's going to be, obviously a very different pace to it. But in the older classrooms, we're going to have a more organized situation where then we start kind of a circle time, a morning meeting. Let's set up the day. Let's get the themes going. Let's kind of support that. We're going to be reading. We're going to be singing during circle times. There's going to be activities following that are going to really kind of be more small group, but times for the children to explore more deeply what's going on. The topics and themes that are picked are things that are going to be the interests of the children, but the idea is that it's giving framework to hit so that we can hit on all the important pieces of the day, whether we're having literacy. Certainly we've got to have fine motor and gross motor development as well. So all of those things are worked in. There's usually what I would call more of a small group time, and that's where it's a little bit more focused. And the teachers, with 3 teachers in the classroom, give plenty of opportunity for one-on-ones. And we're kind of always doing those informal assessments. We're seeing where the children are, how they learn differently, and how we can meet all of their needs. There's certainly going to be gross motor play, so important. We've all got to move, and so that we can focus. So the play spaces or wiggle rooms in the schools really provide that opportunity, and they're used throughout the day. There are schedules, but there are also times, especially with 2s, that they might need to go out and do a couple of laps before they come back in for their circle time, just so that it's more meaningful for them. Afternoons, they usually have their lunch and nap time. And then the afternoons, there again, we're kind of coming back together. We're getting those activities in. There's going to be music a lot in the afternoon just to kind of get us up and going and carry right through to the end of the day with activity is going to be balanced and kind of mirror what's happened in the morning just to support those activities that have gone on. In the infant environment, it's going to be a much more individualized environment because every day is so different and everyone's learning changes so much on a daily basis. So the teachers in there are really masters of kind of giving that individualized care, making sure that we're keeping up and encouraging. So 2 very different kind of flavors, but I think at the same time, they all are very similar in that the focus is always on the children. We're seeing where they are and then trying to find creative ways to meet everyone's needs.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, and I would say one of the big things in the way we position a full day and why we go full day is, and I think Lee said this in the beginning, is that you make sure whether you're looking at preschool or you're looking at daycare or childcare, what is important to you as parents is important in the selection process. And so choosing a school or program that aligns to how you want to live your life or the way you have to live your life because of work, it should be an important factor in how you choose school. We have another question here. This is a good question. What is the best age to send your child to school? 1-year-old, 2-year-olds, infants? I'm going to start this question with Serena. Serena, could you talk a little bit about a parent of an infant and would maybe say, when is the best time to send your infant to school?
That is very individualized. When you're a parent of an infant, it's probably one of the hardest decisions you'll make, whether to send them to school or should you stay home with them. So it has to be a choice that you come to knowing what the expectations you have of a facility. But I would say some of the key things is you want to make sure that your child is fully drinking from a bottle. You want to make sure that you're comfortable separating from them. You want to also make sure that the environment that they're in is individualized, like Meg spoke about. If you decide to put your infant in a childcare facility, no matter what they call it, that day should be individualized for your child. You should be able to have a say in the feeding schedule, somewhat of the napping schedule. So while it's individualized, when you put them in, there's certain things that you should always look for, and that's individuality in the program for infants.
Thank you so much, Serena. I want to pick up on one thing that you said, Serena, and then I'll switch the question over to Meg and Lee to talk about maybe some of the older children about when's the right time to send your child to a preschool. Diving into separation, Serena, COVID aside, pretend COVID doesn't exist, and we all wish that were true. What do families look for from schools in terms of easing with not just child separation, but family separation? What are good things to look for? Maybe questions that a parent could ask of a school.
Things to look for is a true open door policy. You want to be able to come inside the facility and be with your child, whether it's to get a hug, whether it's to breastfeed. You want access to the center at all times. You also want to make sure that the teachers are very interactive with infants. You want to make sure that they're being held when they're being fed. For the parents, we want to provide enough opportunity for you to come in and feel as comfortable as needed. So whether you need to have 3 or 4 tours, whether you need to have a few getting to know you meetings with the staff, with the teachers in the classroom, I often say for the infants, the separation policy is more for the parents than the child. So we have to do more catering to the parents, making sure they feel safe, secure. One thing that is true for all age groups, if you're not comfortable where you left your child, you will not be able to perform at work. It's not going to work out. So we want to do everything. So that is another individualized process. Some parents need more time to make the decision. Some parents need more time to separate. So we, especially here at Vivi, we customize that process for all the parents so they could all feel comfortable.
Thank you so much, Serena. Um, Meg, I'm going to throw this next part of the question to you. Now, imagine you're not a parent of an infant, but you're a parent of a 1 or 2-year-old. You know, some of you have probably already experienced this, and I'm talking to the parents. Many of the traditional private preschools in New York have very strict age cutoffs. So you can't enter a 2's program unless you're born in September. You can't enter a 3's program unless you're 3 by September of that year. But for a family that has some flexibility where maybe the infant has been home and they're entertaining sending their toddler, 2 or 3-year-old to school for the first time, what's the best age to go to school, do you think, Meg?
I think the best age to go to school is any age. Honestly, I think that, and I think the exciting thing is that it really is school. It's not just care. And I think kids are really building a lot of flexibility and trust when they get to interact with other adults outside of the family. They're learning how to engage. They're learning how to be social beings. They're learning how we're all the same in some ways and different than other ways. So there's so many things that can happen in a classroom that can't really happen in a home environment unless you have a very large family and lots of people to interact with. So I think any age is the right time. You have to think about when it's the right time for you, because I think what Serena said is so true. You have to separate from your child too, and you have to know that you feel safe and comfortable in that environment. And if the school should do everything they can to give you that trust, because without that trust, we can't do our jobs, and you can't, as Serena said, go to work and do your jobs either. So there isn't an age where it's the best. And what I really appreciate about Vivi is we're adding to our community all the time. And so there's always someone new to play with, and always someone new to learn about, and someone new to interact with. And I think that's pretty special.
Thank you, Meg. That's great. We have a family who ended their question with, my husband and I are stressing out. Don't stress out. It's going to be okay. We're here to help, and we're so glad you're here to learn a little bit more about our program. So there are a couple different parts to this question. One is, how can parents at home reinforce with their infant what is being done at school? And so we'll get to that question. The second part of the question is, what are recommendations for finding schools? I'm going to do the second part first, and then Lee, maybe you can talk about like the home to school connection and how teachers communicate with parents, and or how parents should think about, as a former infant teacher, reinforcing activities in school. But for the second part of the question, we are going to share after this. We're going to send you out a list of different resources, as well as a few different things. And this actually applies to the next question, which is about language immersion. So first of all, for those of you that are in the city, we're going to send out links to different pages of where you can go to find out about different types of school, as well as their admissions processes. We'll send you a link to the NYC DOE page. We'll send you a link to the Parents League. If you're in New York City and looking at private preschools, Parents League is a wonderful resource to vet on options. You came to us through like the #1 parent group, Park Slope Parents. Stick to this group. They do great work. If you're around the country, Great Schools is another great website. While we can't endorse individual family rankings of schools, it's still a resource that will provide you an aggregate of different schools in your neighborhood. And I put an extra bullet in there. And then for the language immersion folks, we'll send you out a list of different language immersion schools that are in and around the city, in case you have any questions about those. One of the great things, having me myself come from a language immersion school prior to this, it is one of the most wonderful things that a young child can be immersed in, because at their age of development, children, and this is a term that is used too much, really soak up foreign languages. And that's partly because they don't have the self-awareness that we do as adults. They really roll with the punches. And so there are wonderful programs that are language immersion programs around the city. Couple key things to look for. You want to make sure that as much as possible, they are doing at the very least 50% of the time in that second language. One of the great things about language immersion is you throw the kids in there, and if you can get 100%, even better. Don't worry about your children catching up later on, because the brain development that accompanies language immersion allows children to catch up later on. And then so I'll say that and I'll wrap it up. But Lee, maybe you can talk about reinforcing infant activities at home. So for instance, imagine you're a family in a rural community, or a parent in particular is looking at our Vivvi in-home program, or maybe a parent is a parent in one of our infant classrooms. What would you do to encourage a parent on how to reinforce classroom activities at home, focusing on infants?
Sure. So I think, the great thing is that there's a lot of communication. So you're going to be in as much contact as you want with the classroom team. The Brightwheel app that's used keeps you updated throughout the day about what the activities are, what your child specifically is doing. The other piece is that really they have individualized learning plans in the infant rooms for the younger children. So, you have a lot of feedback there. You're going to know each infant is on kind of their own path. So you're going to know what kind of activities are going on for them, what kind of skills they're going to be working on, as far as books they're reading, or favorite songs played in the classroom. Things like that are going to be shared as well. But the teachers really do give you the feedback that you need. So as much as you need to feel comfortable and confident, and also, I think, with the infant room, and certainly as Serena indicated earlier, most important piece is that you feel comfortable. And so when you're kind of relaxed and then thinking about it, okay, I see, what can I do to follow up on these activities? Those are great conversations to have with the teachers. And it's a very fluid, it doesn't have to be at certain times. There are times during the day that are easier for them to get in contact or make a call, but certainly sending a note on Brightwheel is always answered immediately. It's when the teachers can really give you the best feedback about what's going on each individual day, but also kind of give you the overview for what's happening that week. So when you know what's happening that week, you know what to expect and you know what to follow up on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it really can't be said enough. Like, really don't hesitate to speak. It's one of the most special parts about early childhood is that there is much more of a family to school connection, because you're really working in partnership on behalf of your young child. And so take advantage of really speaking to your educator, asking questions. And it's a very good vetting question for a school. What are your communication policies for parents? If the school doesn't have an answer on how you can come to them with questions, you consider that to be a flag. Or if they don't have education opportunities. For those of you that are interested in our in-home program, our in-home teachers, our trained Vivvi teachers that push into the in-home environment. Okay, we have another question on health and safety, and I'm going to take that one. How should we think about going back to school in the time of COVID, and what policies should we look out for? What I put up on the screen is there for effect, not to take notes on. This is Vivi's health and safety plan. As I mentioned from the get-go, we've been operating throughout the pandemic, and we've done so incredibly successfully by working closely with local health authorities, following the guidance of the CDC, and also talking to fellow educators about how they implement health and safety practices. Our health and safety plan is built around a few key things that you should look for in your school, depending on the severity of COVID cases in your area, wherever you are. A couple important things. Does the school have a policy about allowing folks on campus if either the children or the teachers are sick? For instance, if anybody's symptomatic of being ill, we don't allow them on campus. We take temperatures at the door. Does the school do regular surveillance testing of teachers? Does the school have policies in place to make sure teachers are tested? It is not recommended that young children get tested, but for the adults on campus, is it? For instance, we basically test our teachers within a classroom. We have 3 to 4 teachers in a classroom. We test one of those teachers at least once a week, so we have a good baseline. Are the adults or children wearing face coverings? Just so you know, it is forbidden for children under 2 to wear face coverings because it's a health hazard. And many schools have optional policies. We require it, but are patient adults when it comes to enforcing it with young children. But we do require that our all of our staff and our faculty wear face coverings. And then the final thing to maybe ask about with the school is to look at their visitor policy. For the time being, we don't allow anybody on campus except for families and teachers while we're on site as an extra precaution. Those are just few of our COVID policies at a high level, and we're happy to follow up with families on it as needed. We look to share whatever we've learned with other schools and families as much as possible. Okay, Meg, this is going to be a question for you. This question is on how do you ensure age-appropriate development within the school? So for parents that have questions about play-based programs, how should parents think about early childhood literacy, or maybe even things like potty training? Are these skills that are acquired statically, or how are they acquired over time?
They're not acquired. They're acquired over time. We're always looking for readiness, and I think that Serena said this, and I think that Lee said it as well. We're looking for those developmental signs that kids are ready for the next thing. We have a set, and most schools do kind of have a set of learning domains and developmental stages and that children should reach at certain ages, but no development happens in a straight line. So we're really aware of that. We don't bar children from our program if they're not toilet trained, because we know in a social environment, sometimes they all of a sudden become interested in this thing that you couldn't get them to do at home because their friends are doing it and they're getting a lot of positive, praise or reinforcement, not praise really so much, but kind of like, good job, you did it kind of, and they want that too. So they're going to try that potty. And we've got these toilets that are, this high. So that's also exciting. They're not as scary as the ones you have at home. So when we see signs that kids are showing that readiness for that, then we'll ask them, do you want to try sitting on the potty? And we'll see what happens. So that is the same thing that we see when we're teaching someone or seeing their readiness to read as well. Whereas if they're showing interest in letters and they're showing interest in sounds in the songs that we sing or in the books that we read, then we know that they're ready for the next thing. And I call it the stretch. We don't ever force children to do something, but we make it interesting and we stretch them to the next stage. I think the exciting thing about early childhood teachers is they do understand development. So they understand what are the stages of learning to read or to doing any skill. And they're going to meet your child where they are and coach them to the next step.
Thank you, Meg. This question hasn't come up yet, but maybe Lee, you can speak to it. Could you talk a little bit about exmissions? Maybe define what exmissions is, because every time I type it in, it seems to be spell checked. It's a made up word, and what parents should ask, what parents should know about their school's ability to help them with the next step.
Sure. I think, that's always a big one. And I think especially in the city, it causes a lot of stress. And so I think what we try and do is take some of the stress off you guys and help you through the process. Exmissions really is helping get into the next step. So at the point to enter another school. So you're exiting our school and you're going to be entering another school. We really, and whether you were thinking of public or private, gifted and talented, there's lots of options out there and it can be very overwhelming. So really what we try to do is to just get you to focus a little bit. As we get to know your child, we start identifying how do they learn? What could be a good setting? What are their interests? But the other important piece too is what's going to work for you and your family. So just doing some research, and Ben mentioned he's going to be sending some information and links for you You know, if you're thinking private school, Parent League of New York gives you gives you the directory there, and you can kind of start thumbing through it. Just start the process. You don't have to start it the day they're born. Nothing is going to happen. You know, September 1st is the deadline for private school, and December for public schools. So if you're with us up until, and I think the most natural time to move on is usually after pre-K and moving into kindergarten. So that's where we do most of our exmissions. And really it's just assessing who your child is, what's right for your family, what are the logistics of getting there. And then we're going to be looking at who your child is. We're also always doing these informal assessments. So we also have a ready kind of built-in framework so that when school reports come around, we know what they're going to be asking us. We know how we can complete the forms most effectively. Having a meeting with me or one of the heads of school is probably the best way to start the process, and just sit down and say, okay, we don't know what we're doing. And that's fine, because then we can really start directing you and just helping guide you through that process. Vivi also has an exmissions team, and they're great once we get to the point that we know where we're applying. And the head teachers are on board to do school reports, and then the exmissions team really kicks into full gear. They're also going to be doing, you know, seminars the spring before, so you'll be able to see, okay, what's the timeline look like. So we're there to help. We're there to help with the process. We're there to make it as stress-free as possible. And really, our whole program is geared toward exmissions. We really want children. We're there to make sure that they move on to success. So yeah. That's basically what we all do there.
Thank you, Lee. Okay. Wow, we had a very productive 30 minutes right there. Are there any other questions that families have? Really, what we also tell our families are no question is too small. So don't feel silly if there's just a question, that you're wondering but you feel a little bit. Don't be embarrassed. We've heard all the questions, and we encourage you to ask any questions that you may have. Okay. All right, we'll give it about 1 more minute. I'll say following this, if you have any questions of the Vivi team after this, you can just shoot us an email at hello@vivi.com. Hello@vivi.com. You can shoot us an email. We're happy. We really believe as an organization that whether you're enrolled in one of our programs or not, we want to be a support and a resource to you. So if you ever have any questions, please do feel free to reach out.